thank you for joining me today in our fashion bit of the Bangla metaverse here. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Ashwini Deshpande. I'm originally from South India, so I grew up in Bangalore. So I'm part of the kind of same diaspora of South Asians. And I've been in the UK for about 5 years now. I moved here to study at London College of Fashion. So I've just graduated London College of Fashion with a BA in Fashion Design and Development. I'm also the founder of a sustainable AI-based fashion company. And I'm currently working as head of 3D design and production at a digital fashion startup called Republiqe. So, fashion tech, fashion sustainability, that's very much my thing.
Amazing. You've done a lot in a very short space of time since you've been in this country. So today is the last day of London Fashion Week. And Fashion Week has been kind of online for the last 2 years. Do you think Fashion Week, as it stands, is still even relevant?
I think at one point it was definitely becoming not as relevant, and I mean maybe I guess that period is kind of extending to now as well. But I think I mean I was just looking at the various events. I haven't been keeping track of it very well this time, to be honest, because I've just moved houses and my Wi-Fi connection has not been great. But I think a lot of designers out there are really trying to do more to make it relevant, because yes, at one point it definitely felt very irrelevant, to me at least, and especially in the beginning of the pandemic. It was just not really in line with how people were thinking about things and how life was going for so many people. But I think slowly the direction of Fashion Week is changing, and just the fact that it's online in the first place just makes it so much more accessible. It means so many more people are able to kind of contribute to it, which changes, the entire narrative. And I think that way it is kind of becoming a bit more relevant once again, I would say. But I think there is a lot of kind of work to be done in order to really make it, as relevant as it used to be once upon a time.
Yeah, I can. Fashion is such an old industry, so it kind of needs shaking up, and it like slowly is moving to kind of a better way of being, because it has to. And in terms of the fashion industry over the last 2 years, not just Fashion Week, it's been so impacted by COVID, particularly say Bangladesh. It's the second biggest exporter of clothes in the world after China. And in fact, I think its biggest export is clothes. And we had the Bangladesh Accord because of the Rana Plaza disaster. So a lot, alongside the sort of the spectacle of Fashion Week, if we look at the manufacturing side as well, it's had to change. It was changing before COVID. What do you think the future is for the supply chain?
Supply chain, like you said, I mean, it's just it's so off, isn't it? The fact that we're celebrating all of these designs, but at the same time on the manufacturing end, it's just it's not okay. The situation is just not okay, and I think that's slowly coming to light a bit more, like with the whole. I think what was I forget the name of the campaign, but when the pandemic first struck, with all of these big companies canceling orders in Bangladesh, refusing to pay for stocks that they had initially ordered and things like that. I think those things slowly came to the light, which in a sense was kind of a positive of the pandemic, because suddenly so many more people were kind of speaking about it, and they were kind of thinking about what goes behind the supply chain, people who otherwise wouldn't have thought about it.
Yeah, it's definitely. Sorry.
Oh, no, I think the question is like, how far will that conversation go? Are we just gonna have that initial conversation and let it go, or are we going to actually take action and make a change?
Yeah, the Bangladesh Accord, it actually expires quite soon in these few months, and Bangladesh itself, it has changed a lot in terms. 100% of the factories are audited to be at least safe. I don't know what that means in terms of, the sort of the labor laws, but the first thing is for the environment to be, in itself safe in terms of health and safety. And yeah, these disasters, it does create a spotlight, and it creates accountability of everybody. The power dynamics within the supply chain, which is usually from the actual brands, even more than governmental law. It has to sort of come from the demands have to come from there, and the consumers. And yeah, consumers are much more aware through the pandemic, have become much more aware about where they sit within sustainability and ethics. And that's, as you said, that's been fantastic. And where does, we like clothes, they're one of the most tactile and real items. So where do you think digital fashion sits within all of that?
Mm-hmm. So I think, first of all, I mean, digital fashion is, with all of these digital fashion shows that are happening and everything, like I said, it just makes it so much more accessible, and means that people from around the world are able to contribute. People from around the world are able to get involved, rather than it being, elite the way fashion has always been. I mean, obviously there is still the question of like, does everyone have access to Wi-Fi and things like that? But I think that's slightly more like a step ahead in terms of being able to address it at the next stage, perhaps. But also, aside from that, from a sustainability angle, I think, fashion sustainability is it's a big word, and there's so much work to be done on every front. So I don't think digital fashion is an entire solution in itself, but I think it can definitely be part of the solution. We talk about, supply chain and things like that, because if you're doing all of your prototyping in 3D digitally, then that obviously, it just makes the communication between where the manufacturing is happening and where the designing is happening just much more efficient. And I think that's really important, to not have to, fly samples back and forth, to actually be able to communicate more easily between kind of the factory and the designers. And at the same time, when you look at, purely virtual fashion that doesn't exist in real life, that's not really for the supply chain, on that end as well, like I think the main thing that needs to help with is to reduce overconsumption of physical fashion. And I think like if it is able to do that, if it's able to reduce the consumption of physical fashion, the frivolous consumption of physical fashion to some extent, I think that can be a huge impact in terms of sustainability. So, obviously the supply chain does still need to change. We still do need physical clothes, and that still has to be done sustainably. But I think this definitely can be part of the solution.
Okay, great. And in terms of, and it's a different, a slightly different market for digital fashion. You see a lot of assets being sold through the gaming industry as well. And it sort of crosses over to all these other areas. And what do you feel about that? Do you think like those industries benefit from kind of very sort of core fashion design sensibilities?
Yeah, definitely. I think with gamers and things, they have always been spending money online the way you and I probably haven't been doing all of these years. So they're kind of very used to buying things that don't exist in real life. And I think they've probably always wanted more options, and for the fashion industry to actually get involved there and give them those extra options, and actually, exploit the fact that they are willing to pay for those things. I think that's a clever thing for the industry to do, first of all. But also, I think there's going to be so much back and forth between, we're going to be picking things up from industries like gaming, and they're going to be picking things up from us. And, I think it can be a really useful kind of collaborative effort if it's done correctly, and it can really push innovation in the fashion industry as well.
Yeah, and I think as well, within fashion, it's very sort of, in terms of the labor force, it's very female heavy, and we know, of course, it's usually men at the top. But in terms of designers and makers, and actually that in itself diversifies the gaming world when the two industries are overlapping, which I find quite an interesting sort of an interesting byproduct of the collaborations across the industries. Um, and you're right in the heart of 3D rendered and digital fashion. What's going to be what's going to happen in the next 5 years with it? Because it's accelerated so much. There's it's amazing what's happened, and also the avatars that have come along alongside the digital fashion as well, which again has really sort of really grown the potential and the creativity and the diversity online of how we represent ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. So it's honestly it's hard to say because 5 years ago we would have never expected to be where we are now, and I think also part of that is because the pandemic kind of accelerated things in digital fashion, which otherwise probably would have taken 5 more years to get to this stage. But I think like this is big now. Like we're not going back. This is happening, and I think in another 5 years, first of all, if you look at Instagram, if you look at face filters and things, the way those have kind of evolved to become so popular, going to be next with that? I mean, that's more, I guess, beauty and that sort of thing. But with kind of things like 3D body scanning and things like just motion capture and all of these things just becoming so much more advanced day by day. I think that's going to be a big part of fashion, just kind of augmented reality and body tracking and all of that. But also excited about, for instance, like Apple's AR glasses and all of the big tech companies are now looking at AR and VR and taking AR and VR very seriously, which I think is going to make a huge difference for the fashion industry, because the fact that those big players are investing in kind of these softwares and this sort of hardware, we're probably going to be projecting clothes onto each other in 5 years' time. Like that may seem really far-fetched right now, but I think it's a very real possibility.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because a lot of the tools which were in they were just for developers and people who had already experience in coding are now kind of out there for everyday people, which then allows for a different type of content creation. And we saw that through Instagram, for instance, a lot of people just became fantastic photographers, and then and that impacted the development of how like the cameras on phones. And in the same way, people will become these sort of AR, VR. Well, they are already content creators. Mixing up all the different media that they can. And as you said, with like Facebook and Snap, and they're bringing out these different recording glasses which will be able to overlay. It's kind of difficult to say, but we know some exciting things are definitely going to happen. So brilliant. Okay, I'm just gonna sort of wrap this up. It's a very quick interview. So for yourself and your company, what kind of offers? Where do you sit in the market?
We're very much about digital only fashion. That's what we do at Republique, and it's very much about young people who want to try and explore digital fashion. That's kind of the market we're going towards, and we're seeing huge success in terms of the number of people who want to try it out. And I think that's the initial stage where loads of people are trying it out, and then you kind of see where that goes, and how many people want to take that up more seriously and kind of invest more in their digital wardrobes, or how many people are maybe not that interested. And like we're in the process of really figuring out that demographic of who's going to really want to take it forward. But I think as a company, like we are quite new and we're still in a very experimental stage, but things are going really great. So let's see how that goes.
Fantastic. It's a good place to be, kind of to look at the landscape, and like with any, if you've got fashion background, you're part leading what's going to happen next, and you're part responding as well, and that's a fun place to be.
Yep, yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much, Ashwini, and hope I'll see you in real life. Should we have a little walk around the world Let's just go walk
I'm
up and down
sure,
the
yeah.
street.
It looks absolutely lovely. I love how you have all of these kind of brick lane sort of graffiti and things, and you also have the Sundarbans, and it's amazing, honestly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, with the metaverse, God, I hate that word already. I myself it's it's a real area of just exploration. Just trying things out and seeing like, is it good, is it bad, and that's a really fun, sort of it's sort of an area of discovery, isn't it, and experimentation.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I think there's just so much potential that, at some stage it's the users who have to discover its potential, not necessarily the developers who have to create potential, because there's already so much potential there.
Yeah.